Hey guys, it's Miss Z here, and we're going to be talking about how to get started on your Tempera Resist. We just have been looking at Matisse, and so we're going to be doing our Tempera Resist in the style of Matisse. And it's really important that you hear those words, in the style of, not copy. Sometimes as young artists, we tend just to copy exactly what someone else did, and that's a wonderful learning experience, but that's not your artwork because it really wasn't your idea to put those items in that arrangement and to paint it. So when I say in the style of, that means that you're looking at what makes this a Matisse and then taking that to your own work. In this case, we're looking at the fact that he has a bold use of color. He uses simplified shapes. In this case, we have lemons and oranges in this bowl, and they're very simplified. And he also uses a lot of pattern. You can see there's stripes back here and lines. There's patterning here in the tablecloth. And then again, it doesn't have to be real complicated. It's just sitting on top of this box, okay? So let me show you how to get started. The first thing that you need to do to get started is to do a sketch. And I have a whole stack of photographs of still lifes for you to look at to be inspired by. So I have pumpkins. I have this one that's more gadget based. Oh, more pumpkins. I have musical instruments. I have teacups. And again, we're doing this in the style of Matisse. So if you were to do the musical instruments and you're looking at this for inspiration, that doesn't mean you have to copy the whole picture. It doesn't mean that it has to look exactly like this. We're doing it in the style of. So we're simplifying these shapes, making them easier to draw, and we're using bold colors. So before you got here today, I went ahead and I did this sketch. And it's important when we think about a sketch that we think that it's just meaningful for us, okay? No one else has to look at this sketch and really understand what you're doing. As long as you understand, that's great. In my case, I did this sketch. I have a bowl, and that's going to be cherries in my bowl. I'm going to have striped wallpaper in the background, and then I think I'm going to have a rose here because I don't feel like I have enough room to really have a good pattern on my tablecloth, but I know that Matisse often had a lot of floral in his artwork, so I thought that would sort of be my way to include that. After you've done your sketch, you want to go ahead and get started on your final draft. We're working on poster board, and the reason is, if you remember from our short video we watched last class, Tempera Resist, you eventually are going to put this piece in the sink, so I wanted the paper to be really strong. And it doesn't matter what color you have. So you're going to look at your sketch, and you're going to redraw it onto your final draft. But the trick is, you're going to actually redraw with a piece of chalk. Mine is green chalk. It can be any color chalk you want. And you want to push down fairly hard so you know what you're doing. And the great thing is when you paint, if you don't like something, you can just paint over it. So in this case, what I would say is that you don't really have to worry too much about this chalk. If you don't like something you do, you can just sort of draw over it, right? So I think some of my cherries are going to be really fat. Here are my cherries in my bowl. And you can see it doesn't look exactly like my sketch. I'm not too worried about that. As long as the idea is there, I'm okay. I'm going to put a stripe on my bowl. I don't know if you're like me, you hate the sound of chalk on paper. It's driving me crazy. Just know that this will be a very short part of the project, okay? Okay, so I did my bowl, and I have to do my wallpaper now. Oops, broke the chalk. And you can see how I'm making fairly bold lines with my chalk. And then I'm going to do my rose down here. And I'm simplifying this shape. I'm not trying to draw a super realistic rose. I just know roses kind of have these lines in the middle to sort of show that there's petals. And then I'm going to have leaves. Okay? And that's it. It is important for this project that you do have pretty thickly drawn chalk lines. So you can see I didn't just, when you saw me working, I kind of went back and forth a few times in places, and that's good. That's what you want. So now you're ready to paint. All right, for Tempera Resist to work, the tempera paint, which is the kind of paint we're using, has to be placed very thickly. Now that doesn't mean that the first layer you put on, you gob on. It just means that you probably want several layers. And the other thing I'm going to make you think about is a true artist doesn't just use paint right out of the tube or the bottle. So these are all colors I just got right out of the bottle, right? but I want to make it a little bit more unique, make it my own. So I'm going to take a little bit of my red, and I'm going to add a little bit of green to it. They're complements, so when I add them together, they tend to darken. So you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner how I'm sort of getting this dramatic maroon color, and I really like that. The other thing you want to think about when you get out paint is some people always get tempted to get out every single color, okay? You only have an hour to paint today. So what I would think about is what part of your composition or your painting are you going to focus on the most, and then get out those colors. So if you're going to focus on the wallpaper, and you know the wallpaper is going to be white and blue, then the colors you get out should be white and blue, okay? So I'm going to try to do my painting in one sitting, which is why you can see my palette has quite a few colors. So now I've mixed up this maroon, and I'm going to use that for my cherry colors. And I don't want to go over my chalk line, and that's going to be really difficult for some of you, okay? And the other thing that you want to do is you want to keep it really, really neat, okay? So I'm going to lift this up to kind of give you a close-up. Let me paint here for a second, and we'll come back and I'll show you the detail. As you can see, I've been painting a little bit, and I want to give you a close-up. My paint is still wet. I put about 3 coats on there, so if I kind of tilt it, you can sort of see it's pretty thick, okay, and that's what you want. And I want you to notice I have not painted over my chalk lines, okay? That is super important. For this to work, you don't want to paint over your chalk lines. So I've painted around my chalk lines, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And this is one of those cases that you want to think about what kind of brush you're using. When I first started, I was using this really thick brush, right? And that's great and everything, but look how small my painting is in comparison. So I eventually changed, and I started using this smaller detail brush, and that was more helpful to me. So certain areas of your artwork are going to require a different kind of brush, and that's important to note. Alright guys, here I am checking in again. I'm still working on my painting. I wanted to show you that my paper is tilting. We call that buckling. And that is when there's a lot of water content on the paper and it just starts to warp. Don't be upset when that happens. When these dry, some of that buckling will settle down, and we can actually put them in the heat press for a few seconds. So don't stress out about that. And I wanted to show you one more thing. So you can see, I'm going to move my paint palette just a little bit. Okay. So you can see here's my painting I've been working on. I'm starting to work on the background. I'm still not painting over my chalk lines. But one of the things that Matisse was really a master of was, even though things were really simple, he'd still have little tonalities. And we call those, you might call it like a slight color change. So I really want to get a close-up here. My background is sort of this cream color, and I've been using it. And I actually would say it's not quite thick enough. It's sort of hard to see on the document camera, but there's still a few streaks of the paper coming through. Now what I would think Matisse would do is he would mix up, since I'm using this cream color, which was just white and yellow, I've mixed up a little bit more bright yellow on my brush, and I'm just going to kind of start brushing that into certain areas. And that kind of just creates a little bit of interest, a little bit of depth. Now, we're going to wash these in the sink, so I don't know how much of this will really stay, but I think it's nice to sort of have it because a little bit of it will stay no matter what, right? And that kind of helps your piece to look more sophisticated, right? We know that if kindergartners drew something and we gave them paint, they could certainly paint it, right? And that's sort of what you're doing here. So by adding tonality, you show a sophisticated understanding of art and space. And as advanced students, that's really what you want to do. So you can see, it's much easier to see now, these sort of blobs of yellow I've put in there. And I'll sort of zoom in so you can see it a little bit better there. That's what you want to think about. I can do that even on my cherries as well. I could say I'm going to take some of my just plain red and dab some of that into my cherries. And that sort of helps them look nice and shiny and ripe and beautiful, and that adds dimensionality. And that adds sophistication, and this helps your artwork look better and stronger. I could even add some of that, there's like a little pink color. I could add a little bit of pink to my cherry in case the light maybe is hitting it. There we go, right? So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep painting, and I'll check back in with you. Alright guys, as you can see, I'm all finished. and my paper's still buckling. That's okay. It's going to dry and it'll stop a little bit. And I'm going to let it dry overnight. And then tomorrow I'll be back to show you how to apply the ink and do the next step in this resist. I want to remind you it's important to paint thickly, right? 2 to 3 coats. And it's also important to mix your own colors. As you can see, I didn't use a single color straight out of the bottle. I'm going to show you what my palette looks like. Okay? You can see I was mixing stuff everywhere. And I also want to look at that I get an F for wasting paint. In fact, I'm going to save this, and maybe one of you guys today will want to use it. But if you look in here with my brown on the table, I have a little bit of black for shadows. I have a little bit of orange because I thought it was interesting. All those kinds of things are going to take your artwork from being pretty good to, oh my gosh, amazing. I cannot believe someone in middle school made this, which is what I expect of my students. So let's get out the paint and let's get cracking.